You are listening to Get Real podcast.
Abby, we'll just roll into this.
Okay, we are live, sort of.
Yeah, we're sort of live, and Dan, it really was like a battle for you to get here this afternoon, wasn't it?
Yeah, it kind of was. Speaking of Florida, somebody cloned my debit card. And I'm so sorry to be late. And I'm Dan, and it's you do sound good. That FaceTime audio is strong.
Really good.
I'm going to stay in my car to make sure that we keep the good sound.
The acoustics in your car are phenomenal.
I'm going to stay.
Somebody cloned my card, and they've been hitting gas stations and Amazon. They spent, including all the fees, about $2,600 in the last 3 weeks.
Wow.
I was wondering, I was working my tail off, and I'm like, oh, Lord. At the end of the day, I'd look at my balance, and I'm like, really?
Something's wrong.
Yeah, and I'm supposed to have all these deposits coming in, and I'm looking, and I'm like, whoa, and they were stealing from me for three or 4 weeks now.
That's
awful.
I hope
terrible.
They give me the money back.
I still see the smoke from the bottom of your shoes racing over here to the studio.
Oh, yeah,
I mean, you were like mercury.
No, and then I go out. It's been a wild day. I go out and try to get the vehicle to drive over here, and the battery is dead. So I drove my work van,
So you know what that means to me? I was just sharing this with Abby on the line. This is going to be a really good interview. I mean, for all of that to get here to do this.
Yeah.
And really for our listeners who are just joining into the middle of a conversation we've been having, we're just rolling with it real today. I just don't care, really, because this is going to be good. It's about being real. We've got on the line with us AbbyLindo. I met her, guess what, during the Extreme Tour in June. Shocker there. And she was the first artist to perform, and I would have to say Abby is a gem to listen to. And I really believe that this is going to be a awesome interview because this is such a diverse individual, somebody that's extremely intelligent, extremely gifted. And I think you and I are going to get a lot out of this, and I hope our listeners get a lot out of this.
It's awesome.
That's what's happened to us a lot when we do these interviews. Abby, a lot of times Dan and I get ministered to in a huge way.
Every time.
So
I really want you to stop with all the flattery and shenanigans. Because I'm sitting here listening and I'm like, that's not even me. That's not me. But thank you.
Well, I'll give you this. I know since I was unable to attend the Extreme Tour to be able to see you when y'all came, and Glenn, since day one, when he came back, he was like, "Oh man, Abby," and telling about your daughter.
My daughter Sierra. Really, what you sang and shared really resonated with my daughter Sierra, and she got the free CD from you. That was
I remember.
blogger. Yeah,
I definitely remember that because, I think what stood out on the Extreme Tour for me, it's a very different type of experience than I even imagined it would be. But what was substantial for me were those individual connections that you got to make with people. And I feel like it discounted this quasi notion that I was going to go and it be about me singing in any kind of way. It's not about me singing. It was so much about me ministering and touching people and, letting God do what he intended to do. And so, even talking to your daughter, I was like, oh, you like my stuff? Because I feel like, I don't know what my demographic or audience is, younger, middle, around my age. I'm 31. And it's like, I have friends who like my stuff, but she's younger. And I was flattered in a sense because I'm like, if it's something you enjoy, wow, God, thank you for letting me do something that people find worthy. I had never performed live outside of my own church setting until the Extreme Tour.
I would have never known that. I would have never guessed that would be
was
the
a
first
fear.
time. And you were the first one to perform too. And when we were here in Charleston,
they were hazing the new girl.
It's not hazing as much as they kind of determined the order. I'm not sure of their process, but sometimes I would go third, sometimes I would go first, and that was one of those times where I was like, okay, jump in. And I think for me, that was a big thing I had to overcome, the fear of being in front of people, because I think the enemy sometimes has a way of destroying us, hitting us where it hurts the most. And so the recognition that I took the step forward to say I would try this and then to actually be received and then to do it, that was something else. And to have to conquer the fear of, maybe people accepting or rejecting my work, being exposed in that way, that was very big for me. But I'm so thankful for that experience and that I got to overcome that because I felt better about me and what I do ever since then.
That's absolutely priceless. And I hope that's something that some of our listeners, because we have a lot of listeners that are artists as well, that are kind of emerging and coming out of their shell in a lot of ways. And for Dan and I doing this podcast, even though we did this, something similar to this on radio many, many years ago, like 18 years ago, was it? Wow. Oh, man. 18 years ago, we did this on radio.
I'm getting old.
This has been a coming out of our shell for us, but coming out in a different way, experiencing the Lord in a whole different way. And as we've taken these small steps forward, Dan and I, we kind of looked at each other when we started this, kind of like, what are we doing? Where's this going? And all of a sudden now we've got all these things that are going on. And really what it boils down to, and you said something that's so precious about the Extreme Tour, is that it's about the relationships and the connections.
Right.
And the connections that were made, even in that small time in the Wayland Park in North Charleston, what's the fruit that's been born out of that really has just been absolutely amazing for me in a lot of ways, in that and what's going on here. So you were born in Jamaica.
Yes.
How long did you live there?
I left Jamaica when I was 4. My parents separated. My sister passed away. She had leukemia. And I think these events, were the catalyst that kind of tore the relationship asunder. And my mom immigrated to Canada and then to Maryland, where I grew up.
Okay, so you grew up in Maryland then. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. What do you remember anything about Jamaica that really strikes out about the church there or anything? Do you have any memories of that at all?
I don't have to be there to know about the church. That's very different. The church there, we grew up predominantly Pentecostal, and the church there is the church here. The church is one big unifier for the diaspora Pentecostal body of Jamaican worshipers. And there are a lot of hymns, because I know that you mentioned that, or saw that on my site. There are a lot of hymns. I grew up singing hymns. We grew up with a lot of there's belief in the supernatural, because I feel like sometimes that's suppressed in many denominations. So speaking in tongues, the fruits of the Spirit, there was a lot of very robust and loud and lively worship. So I'm very much used to that aspect of a church service. And I think that so many of the things, that there are a lot of parallels between the message or the actual not homily, but the sermon between a Black American church and Pentecostal church or Baptist church and Jamaican. So those things are typically traditional as far as the church there and the church here.
Can you share with us how you came to the Lord and how you came to realize that He's called you to minister through music?
I think that's a twofold thing, not just a two-part question. But when I was a child, the word tells you to train up a child in the way they should go. So I, as an adult, I didn't depart from it, but I had to have my own connection with Jesus in order for me to stabilize that, because so many things will come to challenge it. So I don't want my mother's Jesus. I want my Jesus. And I know that sounds backwards, because people are I worship the Jesus of my grandmother, my grandfather. I'm no, I want Jesus for me. I want to have a real relationship and a real walk with Jesus. Like you said, there's this thing that happens. You go to school, you get intellect, and sometimes it challenges your faith. But I was rooted because Jesus revealed himself to me. So although I was baptized when I was maybe 14 or something like that, and Florida, when I was going to school there, and we lived a few years there in South Florida, Fort Lauderdale area, rededicated my life and kind of refreshed my spiritual walk in my early 20s when I was doing my undergraduate degree, because God revealed himself new to me. And ever since I was a child, from my baptism or even before then, I was writing songs. I remember for my 13th birthday, my mother gave me a Casio keyboard, and I wanted to write, as I call them, just Jesus songs. I didn't call them Christian songs or gospel songs or CCM. I didn't have a genre. I was 13, but I wanted to write Jesus songs. I wanted to write joyful songs. I wanted to write painful songs. And I never classified it as a worship or praise and worship or anything like that. But I wanted to write songs about God, about my walk, and about my experiences and as a believer.
That's interesting you say that, because when I was 15, my parents got me a Casio keyboard as well. And Dan and I even did, we did a mock spoof of this about a year ago. Oh, actually, it was the beginning of the year. where I would play everything in minor keys on my keyboard, and my mom would ask me, "Why are you always playing in minor
do it better
keys?"
than that. Do you do the Simpson, Marge Simpson voice? That's
Glenn, why are you always playing in minor keys? It's depressing.
Were you writing sad songs?
I was, and I really can relate to that. We're going to talk more about that in a minute in relation to the degree that you're working on. And
Right.
you didn't have a genre when you started, and really your genre kind of goes all over the place right now, which is awesome because that's the way the Spirit of God works. You can't put the Spirit of God in a box.
I like how you spun that credit. It's good.
One for Glenn today, Dan. Give me a high five, man.
nice.
I am rolling
nice.
today.
Without
Yes.
coffee.
You wouldn't believe how many cups I drank before you got here.
Okay,
So
great. That explains a lot.
I'm running off of that. So you fuse a little bit of pop, reggae, and electronic in your music. What are your favorite styles?
Ooh, favorite styles. I was that like kind of punk, emo, indie music kid growing up. So I liked how when I listened to different indie songs, they would use, they would kind of deviate as far as a chord sequence or just timing. I like the weird kinks in a song, and I liked when I don't know, I like the use of experimental electronic sounds. I feel like favorite genre is hard because there were musical influences all over. Moving around as a kid, like I stayed in Baltimore growing up, but I left when I was 8, came to Florida, and then went back to Baltimore to finish high school. And it's so different. The climate, the cultural climate, the socioeconomic climate, everything is so different. And the music was different too. So I was influenced by hip hop and pop and country and gospel, but the gospel in Florida sometimes was very different than the gospel in Maryland. In Maryland, it was more predominantly Black, even the school I went to. So when we did concerts in high school, we did gospel concerts. We would go to a church and do gospel concerts in high school. And things like that inspired me because I liked the way that certain artists or certain concerts or songs we did tied in different genres. And I liked the idea of not being locked in a box as far as one type of music.
I have to share a secret. Dan, you probably you probably don't know this, and our listeners don't know this. But this is time for me to be vulnerable because I've never been really locked in a box. Though my mainstay is metal. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I know what you're about to say,
all right.
and I remember this.
All right.
And I have refrained from bringing this up.
Okay. So
I'm intrigued.
back when I was in college, the place that I would hang out was the local dance club.
Maybe I don't know.
Okay.
And I liked techno. I liked electronic. I liked all of that. I liked rave. I was really into that. And what I figured out how to do, there was even a point in time where my dad was going to buy me a DJ mixing board so that I could learn how to do mix. And I was doing mixtapes, not just one song and then another song, but what I was doing as I figured out how to use the pause and record button on the stereo that I had to mix, and I would find the different beats and fuse the songs together and make mixes that way.
Okay, cool. That's
You
not what
didn't
I
know
thought
that,
you were
did you?
going to say.
What did you think I was going to say?
It was a fan club of a certain type.
okay. So, do you want me? Okay,
Go ahead, embarrass
okay,
yourself.
I'm going to embarrass myself right now. All right,
Glenn the metalhead.
Glenn the metalhead almost became a member of the Paula Abdul fan club.
I'm sorry. I got to just bring a little bit of laughter there.
She was very popular in her heyday.
Yes.
It's not that strange.
That didn't dig him out.
I
got him
still have some of the dance mix EPs up on the record rack up there. And I was really into that because there's a heaviness to it. I like that. I like the heaviness of that
You
type
know
of
what?
music.
I can't even remember what she put out. I'm thinking, isn't she on
Straight up now, tell me, do you really want to love
That didn't
me
help your
forever?
case.
Yeah, that was a big
That
one.
didn't help your case. And if you start dancing, I'm out of here. Help me, Abby.
You used to give me a hard time about that on the radio show
I
too.
did.
The Paula
I
Abdul
did.
fan club.
I thought you were the president.
I had a friend of mine, and he and we both like Guns N' Roses, and he went to a military college in the North, and I went to a military college in the South, and There was one evening we were all together, both of our families. He's like, Glenn, I just don't understand you. You get letters from the Paula Abdul fan club and you subscribe to Military History Magazine. Your mailbox is just a mess. So
that's funny. But like what Abby was mentioning about growing up partially in one culture and then going back and getting steeped in another culture, a lot of that really does, I think, prepare you in different ways for ministry. I think at last count, including college, I went to about 17 schools, which sounds amazing.
Wow.
But I went to 4 different kindergartens, and it wasn't because I got kicked out. It wasn't for biting people or anything. But I do think I even look in my own life and I can go into a room and it could be any type of person. And I'm like, oh, yeah, well, I used to live there. And I feel like I can relate to them better. I think it's a ministerial asset in a way when you get that.
And Dan, for you and I and Abby, I'm going to ask you this question in a minute because this is a theme that I see through all of your songs. Everything in our lives, not just our lives, but everything in everybody else's lives, God has arranged and ordained for his purpose and for his glory. Mm-hmm. Everything is sovereign. And that's just, for me, it took us a while to figure that out. Oh, yeah. Yeah, because it's like, I'm confused.
Yeah, I'm confused. The guy in Florida hitting my credit card. No, but it's ordained. I sat there and I said, God,
there's a reason,
There's a reason.
There's a reason.
I think when you start to look at things like that, like, what am I learning from this? What process is happening with this? It really changes your outlook on life and how you handle things like that.
Yes.
Because I go from zero to stressed in no time. But when I sit and think about, even when you have offenses between brethren or just people in your life, you're just like, what is their motivator? What is the thing I'm learning from this? You start to be more empathetic and more understanding because you're looking at it in that scope. And I feel like it's just this kind of like dangerous, disarming like tool,
Yeah.
So the enemy can't pull you out like he used to pull you out. Not saying you don't get upset or sad, like frustrated, like, what's going on? Where's my money? In your case.
Yeah,
But,
I like the way you put that, zero to stress, In the morning, sometimes I do my morning ritual and I try to tease the back of my mullet a little bit because I like it to look. No, I'm just joking. But I usually listen to Paul Abdul when I'm doing my morning ritual.
Do you?
No, I'm just messing with you. But no, that's good. That's a really good point because when you see that things are sovereign and that God is in control and how merciful he is, because for our listeners, you may be sitting there and going like, wow, you hear Abby and she's talking about life experiences. She's talking about a loved one dying of cancer. I also had a niece die of leukemia. And at the age of 9, it was really heavy for the family. And when you begin bringing up even painful things and you have to deal with that, acknowledging God's sovereignty, it does something. It puts you in a place where you understand that God is merciful. That's why a lot of evil and a lot of bad stuff are allowed to go or allowed to be here, because if he was like, oh, moratorium on all evil, we would be the baby thrown out with the bathwater, and I'm like, no, God is merciful and good. So that's a big deal. That's a good point.
And God's sovereignty is one of the themes that just really, it could be where I'm at with God right now, but God's sovereignty is one of the themes that I see stick out in the majority of your songs I've been listening to, what you have on SoundCloud. And it could be where I'm at. Is that something that you're purposely expressing because of your own experiences, or God's sovereignty? How's that been revealed to you? Because you can't sing about it in genuineness without actually having experienced it. And I can tell that that's something that you've experienced. How has that come about?
I think I've definitely experienced it, but I think I'm not even taking credit for it. It might be just some innate thing built into my perspective now, because I'm not sitting and thinking that specifically. Sometimes when songs come to me, they come from a broken place. They come from a joyous place. They come from different experiences. But again, like when I have experiences, I put it in the lens of what God is working in me, or how things are changing or benefiting me, how my experience is going to even be something to benefit someone else. And I think there's like a pain in that sometimes, because you're relinquishing so much of what you thought your life was about, kind of. Like even the transition now, like you said, you're going to ask me about school. I left like life that was established. Like I was a teacher, I had a home, all of these things we set in order. what's the saying? We make plans and God laughs, kind of, because that is what happened. Like, we just made plans. I'm engaged. I have a house. I have a job. These are things that make people happy. And God, thank you for these things. And God is sitting there like, I gave you these for a moment, but like, you don't even know what I'm really trying to do. Is this all you thought I had for you? Kind of. And I had to laugh about it because now, not even a year has passed since I've left everything. And there's a sense of liberation. And my music has that now. Like, what I'm writing, it feels different, And I think what I'm trying to do is basically let that speak for my walk. And so I guess if in my walk you're noticing, in the music you're noticing that I'm acknowledging His sovereignty, then that's just something in my walk. And I think once you do that, it just feels good. It just feels good because it's not about you, and it's not about your might or your strength or your ability to do anything. Once you just relinquish that and realize that God is reigning and is controlling and has good things for you in the midst of everything, oh goodness, it's like this burden is just lifted and you can move about and do what you need to do, knowing that He is in control. Do you know what I mean? I feel like I'm rambling, but
no, that's crystal clear.
I'm going to take that when I edit this and go back and listen to that over and over again. Because what you're saying is really resonating in me right now. One of the things that I've kind of noticed over the past couple weeks and months, because there's a lot of changes going on in Dan's life, there's a lot of changes going on in my life, and what I'm learning to do is not to fall in love with the season that we're in. Okay.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, that's pretty heavy.
And
Glenn.
we get focused on the season. It's like, okay, I've arrived. Okay, I'm at this job now. Or
Yes.
I'm doing what I think what God wants me to do now, and we get stuck there. But we can't
Yes.
do that. But what we need to do is we need to be in love with the season giver.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, that's Glenn. That
just
was
fed me.
yeah.
That
Both
just fed
both
me.
of y'all fed me. I'm over here just kind of digesting.
I knew this was going to be a good one.
Well, I'll tell you this.
I could feel it.
When I was working, I was listening to one of my favorite books from A.W. Tozer, the Pursuit of God. And there's a particular chapter in there that's called The Joy, I believe, of Possessing Nothing. And he started talking about the difference between like how Adam and Eve were made originally as like this shrine to just enjoy and worship God. But then when we're born in a fallen state, we sit there and we want to put everything else in this world, all the gifts that He gave us from music and poetry and physical love and romantic love, all the wonderful things, we want to put it on the throne. We want to put it in that spot that was meant for God. And then as we walk, even as Christians, a lot of times we'll slide into regarding our own happiness, all these different things. And sometimes it's very difficult when you look at something and go, you know what, God, I'm willing to give this up and I want to serve you. And you have this death kind of experience about a dream or a disappointment or, whoa, and then you sit there and you go, God, I want to serve you. I desire your pleasure and your presence and the joy of you more than I do this stuff over here. And you kind of clear the clutter off that throne, and I think we're all three going through that type of thing. It's a painful thing, but it is joyous, it's real joy.
It's a mixture of joy and pain at the same time.
Yeah. Jane. I think I dated her. No,
Jane.
I'm just playing.
I like poi.
Poi? Okay, poi.
Yeah, there you go.
That sounds like something you'd order like at a Thai restaurant.
Yes, I'd like a big bowl of poi, please.
Jane poi. Yeah, but it's I love that. I love not being in love with the season and basically keeping Him on the throne. Yeah, those are listen, you guys are feeding into me. I had to be on campus today to do a study session. And so I wasn't at church and I was like, I need a thing.
Well, here
And
we
this
go.
is the thing.
That's
Jane
awesome.
and Poi.
Jane and Poi, and and the revelation that at one time Glenn was almost a member of the Paul Abdul fan club. I mean,
that is edification.
totally right there. You see, once you slide that off the plate, God can really move. That's
Now that you've abased yourself, I expect good things.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So, Abby, you are very, very busy. You are working on your PhD in ethnomusicology.
Whoa.
I think I spelled that right on the notes here. But
Did he pronounce it correctly?
He did.
Good.
Nice.
You were on the Extreme Tour. You teach.
Right.
You've got a new album coming out. You've got all of these things going on. How do you do this without getting frustrated, burned out, or entangled in just doing stuff and then missing God?
Okay, so I'll step back. Okay, so I'm not missing. I think God is teaching me to be patient with myself. There's this notion that you have to be like everything to everyone, and I've kind of released that to a certain degree early on, but I still struggle to be all these things that I see myself being in a timeline that I've set. So God is saying, all those things you described, I'm doing those things to different capacities, but I'm doing it now more with a better understanding that I don't have to do them with the same amount of urgency. So, for example, the album that is coming out next year isn't even halfway done, and I am so content with it because I would rather it take time and be right than be rushed and do nothing, As far as teaching, I only teach in the midst of my assignment as a graduate student, so it's not a constant teaching. I assist students like how I did today, a study session or teaching a class or two or three throughout the semester, but I'm very glad that I'm not assigned as a teacher, because as a graduate assistant, teacher's assistant, I just help with classes while I'm taking my own and working on my dissertation, which is just in the very beginning stages. I think you asked about ethnomusicology, which is just, it's a mixture of musicology and anthropology. So I'm studying cultures, people, and social networks within musical capacity. And I think what's great about what I'm doing and the flexibility to do what I'm doing the way I am doing it with the PhD program is that, again, it's not as linear. Time is kind of functioning in a better way to accommodate all these different things I have to do. In a couple weeks, the semester's over, and then I have time to just work on my music, just see family, just balance out social and productive life with my own creative things in school. So I think that's kind of refreshing, more so than when I was an educator. As a teacher, even during the break, I'm still doing things, creating things, working hard, trying to do things for my students. Because, the teacher, we don't forget about the kids when we leave. We're always thinking about the kids, And so even though you just named a lot of things, understanding what box they go in and how much time to allocate to each thing is very beneficial for me. And that's how I handle those things and don't get burned out.
I would say that takes a certain amount of wisdom from the Lord, and that ties into that patience and waiting for Him in all of that to show you how to do that. Would that be a fair statement to say?
That's a fair statement. It definitely comes with wisdom, because I've been in the burnout. I've been there just teaching and doing other things and trying to make music and thinking I have to do all these things. And God is like, you're enough. I love you. You're going to have time to do these things. And I'm like, you're right, though. Yeah, like you are literally in charge of everything and I need to calm down. So that's what it boils down to at times. Like right now, sure, I have these pressing things for school, then this pressing thing or other things take priority. But like God is just showing me I'm in charge of your time. I'm working on doing better with that.
I was having a conversation with another gentleman this morning, and we were talking about putting these things in boxes, doing different things, because a lot of times what people do is they think, and this is why there's a lot of failed ministries, and this is something that I experienced personally, because when I felt called to ministry, I put everything else aside that God had knit into me to do. I just put it to the side and lived miserably in a place that I wasn't supposed to be in. But it's taking me, and I'm still learning how to do this. I have not really gotten a full grasp of this yet, but I understand what God is showing me. And that is, you can do all the things that God knit in you to do when you're submitted to Him and His Spirit and His timing. And the example that I was using with the gentleman that I spoke with today was King David. Because you take a look at King David, according to the world, King David does not make any sense. He was a king. He was a warrior. He was a poet. He was a shepherd. He was a musician. He was making musical instruments. Well, and I'm sure there's a lot of other things that he was doing that we didn't know, that we don't know about. But he was just what you would consider, what the world would call a Renaissance man.
Renaissance man.
Yeah.
Yep. Most definitely.
Huh.
Yeah.
The degree that you're pursuing, I find fascinating. And I wanted to ask a question that Glenn and I have talked about, a bit of an open question. And it's something that just kind of you hear over the years and you're like, yeah, that's somewhere in the scripture. And it turns out I don't think that it is. But what is your opinion on this statement that music is the language of the spirit? And that is, and if that's a long answer or something you want to think about, that's fine. But I don't want to put you on the spot too much. No, I enjoy putting you on the spot.
There we go. Welcome to the Get Real podcast.
But Glenn takes notes, and I mess with people. That's our kind of our formula.
The language of the spirit. I think biblically we can agree that music has a great deal of functionality in the life of a believer. Say that again. Music is the.
I know that just through the years, and I think it was a pastor that Glenn and I had used to often refer to music being the language of the spirit.
Languages.
And many times in the scripture, you'll see that prophets, David, who was used to prophesy the Messiah and the crucifixion, a lot of different things that happened, there would be a relationship with music and the prophetic, or music being the language of the spirit. I know that different writings that I've read, Rudolph Otto, Nicholas of Cusa, that would talk about it's so difficult to comprehend things that are holy. And it's so difficult for the finite mind to interpret or comprehend the infinite or infinite that oftentimes poetry and music and song is a more elevated and fluid kind of pneumatic way of being able to express things from a realm that we're alive to now, being saved. But it's like, it's very difficult. And so I think there's credence within that statement, but that sounds like a fascinating, like you could write a dissertation on something like that. Maybe you could. You could do that one.
You asked me this, but you've answered it in a way, but I think that's really a strong explanation. I think when we recognize that we have a saying, in the world, music is the universal language, and some people find offense with it, especially in my camp of academics. But universal in the sense that it breaks down these language barriers, And when we're talking about things that are prophetic, things that are spiritual, things that are holy and beyond our comprehension at times, music isn't saying those things. And music, is elevating or going beyond the simplicity or baseness of our words. And so, you've illuminated it perfectly. And I think that, again, scripturally, we have all these instances where even we know that when we get to heaven, we're making music.
Yes.
Music is supposed to transcend something. And I think it does that because, not to be super Jamaican, but I think Bob had a few quotes that I really love, Bob Marley. And one of them is about when music hits you feel no pain. And he went in deeper and had to talk about it because this was a lyric in a song. But music is supposed to move you in a way outside of the spoken word. So he even said poetry. There's a poetry to music itself. And I think you have a strong connection with God. Many people play a certain way. And I've heard this, and then people are saved by the way that they are playing music, instrumental music. And I think that God uses that as another tool for us to have a connection with him, if we allow it. I think sometimes we hinder, or we try and stand in the way of what God is doing, but the music as a tool, without any words, without anyone singing words, even when you listen to worship songs now, and they utilize this a lot, they have onomatopoeic sounds or ahs or ohs, and it's moving. So yeah, you make a good point. I'm sorry if I'm just going off.
No, not at all. That's enlightening.
I saw on your website you had a little piece about sorrow in sound. And for me, I like music that is a little bit more sorrowful sounding. I'm very attracted, as we talked earlier,
from all the songs you wrote in minor.
Yeah, to a minor key, and the ones that I listen to in a minor key. What have you discovered about that in people finding joy in sorrowful sounds, even when there are no lyrics, when it's just instrumentation or just maybe an ooh or an ah or something like that?
I think it's the potential for connection. I think it's that constant acknowledgement that we're looking for connection. And in the music, the sorrow that is transmitted in sound is something that we can connect and understand. It reverberates in us because it's something we've experienced. And I think what I had written there was probably was that pertaining to my studies and things?
Yes,
because,
yes, it was. Yeah.
I'm interested in not just funerals, but just different ways that people mourn.
and the music related to that. Because like growing up in Jamaica, we have these hymns and songs and different things that we do for funerals or in the graveside, and other cultures do things differently because, you know, some people have a very quiet kind of solemn ceremony for a funeral, whereas Jamaicans, like during the actual service, it's all lively music. The person isn't really dead yet. It's probably when you get to like the graveside where it's more real and like understand it and understood, and you're not trying to negotiate with it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's something, it's one of those universals. We connect and identify with pain or sorrow in music. When you listen to Jewish music, klezmer music, different genres of Jewish music, it's in minor mode. It's in minor because they're identifying with their painful past, and the music is transmitting that. I think sorrow is something that it's one of those things that we all just go through at some point. And so music is a great tool to help us negotiate with it and connect.
It's interesting that you bring up the Jewish music in the minor key, because most of it is written in minor keys.
Right.
I've always been very attracted to Jewish music as well. As a matter of fact, when I spent some time in Israel, the Mizrahi radio station was something that I'd listen to every day while I was at work when I was there. And I connected with that. I was like, oh, I really like this. And it was minor, and it moved me. And if you take a look at the record and CD collection that I have here in the studio, I have some Jewish music, and then I have Gothic metal, and then Gothic electronic, and all that. So most of the stuff that I have is in minor key.
You know what you were saying made me think of a particular scripture, which when I was young, I didn't understand. It was sometimes some of the most marvelous nuggets in the word are things that when you read them the first time, they seem like a contradiction or seem like you trip over them or something. And in Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 3, it says, sorrow is better than laughter, for by a sad countenance the heart is made better. And I think that's a beautiful verse. And I even think it's prophetic in this particular sense, that when we're in this world, we're enjoying the things of this world, and we know that, man, okay, it's fun to eat, it's fun to be with family, it's fun to laugh and hang out with friends, but we all know that death is looming. We all know that 80% of the story is like, well, now we try to focus on the zippity-doo-dah, right? We try to focus on the bluebird of happiness.
That's all the good stuff.
Yeah, what is it? The keep on the sunny side of life, right? So we want to focus on that, and we can kind of pull cozy covers and hide under the covers from the hard edges of life and death and so forth. But in general, the beautiful thing that I see about this is the blessing of even how God normally brings us into salvation is through contrition.
Pain. Yes.
It's through pain. It's through contrition. It's through, I think of that, who was it? When the two men went into the temple to pray, and you got the publican lamenting his lack of righteousness. You know what I'm saying? And he's sitting there. He wasn't happy-pappy getting ready to waltz into the kingdom. He was down. He was low. He was humbled. And God said Jesus said that he went home justified. And I think musically, we all kind of know that the gist is a little bit more on the melancholy side, the fall of man, the redemption of man, the fact of how many are going to be saved versus not saved. I mean, there's a lot of heavy duty truths that don't just make me want to skip down the sidewalk, you know. But we see that with great joy, but it's actually really serious stakes. And I think that component that both of y'all were talking about the draw of more melancholy or sad music is very powerful to the human psyche, you know.
This is helping me understand me a little bit more. That's why I asked the question.
Okay.
From Paula Abdul to minor key music.
That's a stretch.
That is a stretch, but
that was pretty sad music in my opinion. I'm just playing. I'm sorry. I'm joking. I guess some pop I kind of like, but not a whole lot.
Not a whole lot. I'm the same way. I'm the same way, but for some reason that's
just me poking fun at Glenn. It's something you have to understand, Abby. I've been making fun of him for 20 some odd years now about that fact.
Yes, and I think
Wait, how long have you been friends?
We actually went to college with each other and didn't know each other.
And we were in some of the same classes together too.
Yeah.
But didn't know each other.
Didn't know each other.
But the ribbing started, I think it was in 1996, I would say.
so.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that's going to go on through eternity.
I ain't stopping.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. So you're working on a new album now, like you mentioned earlier, and it's going to pay homage to some of the older traditional gospel songs and hymns. And you expressed on your website that it's going to have some new sounds as well. Dan and I, we both really like old hymns and gospel songs. I mean, they are just meat, and they really draw you closer to the Lord. I mean, you're getting good word through those songs. Mm-hmm. What is it that sparked this project for you?
I think in its entirety, a lot of it is me. I feel like it's such a stereotype, but kind of coming home. There's a part of me that loves electronic sounds, but I haven't done a ton of found sounds. So it's like you'll hear more like, I don't even want to give it away or say it like that because it's not just that. But like I'd be recording and you'd hear the street or you'd hear like different sounds integrated into it.
Nice.
And then as far as hymns, I mean, I grew up singing hymns. That's how I trained my voice. I always heard these hymns and it wasn't from a big singer or a name, although your Paula Abdul was my Paula Abdul is Mariah Carey, I guess, because I loved Mariah Carey growing up and I wanted to sing like her. But the hymns would just be any church sister who was amazing, who sang with the pain, who sang with the strength, who sang with meaning, and like that moved me. And so, I mean, a lot of Jamaican hymns are just the same hymns here. And one of my favorite ones was The Love of God. And I remember singing that with my mother. And my mother is a serial alto. She is always altoing. So it doesn't matter what you sing, she will go under you and she will just so I soprano and I'll sing anything because sopranos typically take the lead. So I'm singing because I grew up singing and my mom always sneaks under there in alto. So when we're singing, like we used to have a tradition every night, we would just come together when I lived with my mother and we'd sing a couple hymns. And she was very much, she's very much a strong believer, but she went through a period where she would do communion almost every night. And we did communion almost every night. And we would sing these songs, but we would sing these hymns together. And I don't know, it was just a strong connection that I felt to the music and its relatability to life. I keep bringing up this universals kind of thing. That appeals to me, these universal things. When you write about things that other people can relate to, they don't have to walk in your shoes. They know it as well. Even the sorrow. These things keep coming up, things you can't avoid in life, and it can be years later, but The Love of God is one of these hymns where the poetry of it relates so much to life, It's so much about your walk. It's so much about, just being tested and tried and things happening and just glorifying God in the midst of it.
Yeah, when you talk about the universals, it makes me think that one of the draws to that, when you hear somebody else singing about the universals, for me, it helps me to understand that I am not alone in these things. Mm-hmm. That these things that I'm going through are just not unique to me, but there's other people that have gone through them, and it gives a ray of hope.
No, most definitely. Do you understand that when I look at the teacher in me is very strong. I'm not in the classroom, but the classroom is in me. When I look at these videos of there was one recently, it really moved me. There was a black teacher, this man, and he's in the hallway with a student who brought a weapon to school. And the camera caught it, like him hugging him.
I saw it.
We are longing for connection. Mm-hmm. When we have all these things we do, the brokenness, the increased suicide with children who are under 18. We have the highest rate. It's doubled since 2006, the highest rate ever of childhood suicide. We are longing for connection. These universals, they not only give us hope, but sometimes they help us to be empathetic and love and connect with each other because God, the Bible has so many scriptures about loving one another and understanding one another because he knew it would be hard.
Yes.
Jesus was here with us. We were a mess and he knows it.
No, that's
and we
that's
need
beautiful.
that connection. It breaks me because I think about the biggest things I did as a teacher for me is leaving and then having a parent Facebook message me like, boy, you really taught her and she loves music and it really brought her out of this dark place or whatever. And I'm like, I did something to who for what? and we're looking for these connections, but we're afraid to say it. And society trains us in a sense to not even be vocal about it, but we need these connections, and these connections aren't sexual things. They aren't a monetary, not having money or having, it's not what they make it seem. It's just literally knowing that someone is there for you. Somebody is dealing with what you're dealing with. You are loved, you know?
Yeah.
I saw that video that you mentioned, and he beautifully, and it was this beautiful, loving, masculine disarming. It was a father to that
Yes.
father. And I no doubt there's fatherlessness or something going on in the kid that was
Yes.
being tempted with violence.
And he wept.
It was,
he just wept. Did you see him shaking?
I did. That was moving and beautiful, and I wouldn't doubt if that teacher, is loves the Lord. On a quick note, I bet you and your mom. I've heard. I have daughters that sing together, and they've been singing together for years and years and years. I bet y'all's voices just beautifully blend and mingle, because you hear family members that have been singing a lifetime with each other, and it's just this. And also, there's probably mechanical, genetic things that are compatible in that way. But I bet y'all sound wonderful together.
You know, what's funny is when I was in Port Charlotte, which is the small city I came from, and she and I were at the same church, the minister of music who I worked under, she'd be like, y'all do that one song y'all do so well. And it would be like, Israel Hot and Your Presence is Heaven to Me. You know that one?
I don't.
Who is like you, Lord, in all the earth? Matchless love and beauty, endless worth.
Oh.
Nothing in this world can satisfy. Lord, you are the cup that won't run dry. And then the chorus simply says, your presence is heaven to me. And every time we sing that song, she's like, you and your mother's voice, there's something about it.
Come on.
You
That
guys do it
blessed me.
together.
That blessed me right
I got
there.
a big smile on my face.
Glenn and I were like, oh, that's coming through Facebook.
When we did that song together, they would be like, there's something about it. And I thought about like all those family bands traveling. I'm like, we need to get like 3 more family members together and just hit the
There
road.
you go. Get a big bus.
A big multicolored bus like the Partridge Family. There you
That's
go.
it.
Exactly.
No, that was beautiful.
That
Thank
was
you.
gorgeous.
Well, you know something? Hymns, I can't remember who said this, but they were talking about that the more theologically sound, the more the word just renews your mind and you get good doctrine and good biblical knowledge. When you have that depth, you can really worship. And it's on a deeper level than obviously God touches our emotions. Obviously, we can express ourselves through dance or run around, do a cartwheel,
Right.
do whatever you want to do. But when you sit there and you have from the very depth of your spirit, just this worship coming forth because you kind of know God or you're starting to know God more and more.
Yes.
And to me, hymns just bring that out. Sometimes I don't even sing. I just listen and I'm like, I let other people sing it. I try to sing it and it's speechless and you're like, and that blessed me just that little bit, man. Chill Bump City.
That was beautiful. You're messing with his hippocampus and what?
at my amygdala.
Amygdala in the brain. Exactly.
I read this book about music in the brain, and before when he mentioned the interview coming up with you and what you were studying, I read a book on Audible called Music in the Brain, and we were talking about where chill bumps come from and this simultaneous reaction from the hippocampus and the amygdala and so forth.
The hippocampus is on both sides of your brain, and when you play or practice music, it strengthens your corpus callosum, which is that tissue that connects both hemispheres. And I think one of my colleagues is doing his PhD on Alzheimer's and how musical therapy helps with like just movement and kind of them regaining like their cognition.
Wow,
it's not reversing
fascinating.
the condition, but so it's cool that you read that book. Was it what else? Was there anything else insightful?
Incredible! They said that I'm a nerd, obviously, but so I do a lot of reading. It was fascinating. One of the things that they said that they pointed out and was that humans were the only mammals that can actually have relative pitch detection. So if you were to sing "Mary Had a Little Lamb," right, and a dog heard you, and then you did that. Your dog hears those as completely separate sounds. They have no relationship towards relative pitch. They cannot recognize that it was the same song being sung. And humans are the only animals that can do that. And they were talking about why, and they pump a lot of evolutionary nonsense, with how it happened and blah, blah, blah. But when I listened to it, they talked about the fact that our baby gestation period of infants inside the mother, and the fact that our babies are very dependent to be with the mother for quite some time after they're born, that space that is there made it so that the children they hear two pitches. Also, the differentiation between the male and the female in humans, men have significantly lower, about an octave or so lower than females. So when children are being brought up, they hear two different ranges of voices all the time. So when I say something and my wife says something, she's talking maybe an octave higher. I don't know musically exactly where it was at, but they were talking about the ability to be able to process that. And I was like, no, man, there's so much more there. God gifted us specifically for him to be able to enjoy him, to be able to be musical in front of him.
Wow.
And all of the giftings that separate us from the lower beasts and lower forms of sentience on the planet. It's not some evolutionary accident that happened. We were made and fashioned to be able to worship him. And it's a good book. Just all the, neo-Darwinistic blather, you gotta get past that. But the other part of it was absolutely fascinating. I think you would find it interesting.
Abby, where can our listeners find your music and how can they best support you?
Wow, best support. I think the musical landscape, like as far as like sales and things like that, I don't know how that stands in outside of like, well, Christian music, all mainstream music, you have streams and like actual sales. Record sales are like nothing. People can stream me on Apple Music, on Spotify. You said you heard me on SoundCloud. I don't even know if I've updated that, but I'm on Apple Music and Google Music and Spotify and all those major things that people have. So you can find my last album there. And I think that was 2018. I'm like trying to remember all this time passed because these years have been really full. But the best way to support, I mean, artists, we eventually make something from streams, but just to, I don't know. Yeah, I guess just stream. Just listen to the music, say you love it, say you like it, say it's doing something. It really blesses my heart when anybody tells me the music touches them. I'm like, Jesus, you see, like, don't play with me because that's like a call to reality. Like, keep doing what you're doing. Because sometimes there is this feeling of, oh, the plate is so full. Should I even do it? That comes ever so faintly in my head. But I'm like, all right, just keep going.
No, you keep
one
singing.
person said,
You edified us singing through the iPhone right there in your car. So I would buy that.
I would, yes.
No, that was, hymns. Bring more hymns. That's from the
please.
request. Hymns.
Oh, but that wasn't a hymn. That was just Israel and Newbury. That was a newer song. The hymn I kept referencing was The Love of God. You know that one, right?
I don't. I mean, I probably would. I'm horrible with titles.
The love of God is greater far than tongue or pen can ever tell. It goes beyond the highest star and reaches to the lowest hell.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
No.
Thank you.
No.
I know, but I guess I know some old.
Let me tell you why I love that old hymn. It is old. It is pretty old. I think it's early 20th century, but it's not like, I think it was late 19th century. So, yeah. But the third verse says, could we would think the ocean filler were the skies of parchment made, right? So the ink is ocean, the sky is paper.
Beautiful.
With every stalk on earth a quill, and every man a scribe by trade. So every man, he knows how to write. To write the love of God above would drain the ocean dry. Nor could the scroll contain the whole, though stretched from sky to sky. Wow. The poetry of this song always gets me. It's such a beautiful song. Oh,
that's majestic. Back then, it was more a literary culture. Now with like the text culture, we're like, God is big. And it's like, oh man, that was so anointed. Thank you, brother. Thank you, boy. It's like, can we sing God is big? Glenn and I joke about that.
The ocean, you're like, God is
big. Yeah, he is big.
Whoa.
And he's really big.
Whoa.
And I'm like small. And it's like, whoa, and a couple of likes in there, No, but that is profoundly beautiful. And it'll stand the test of time,
Absolutely will. Abby, we are, for the month of January, we are going to make you the prophetic artist of the month. So we are going to put your information up on the Lithos Cry website. That's lithoscry, LITHOSCRY.com. And what we will do is put the links to your streams on there so our listeners can go right there and stream directly from our website and get acclimated or experience your music that way. To help you out, but that's what you do is just so beautiful.
Can I Can I be the pathetic artist of the month in February with My God is Big?
Yes, you can. We'll do that for
If
April.
you made that song, I would probably rock to it and be like, my God is big.
No, and hey,
And I am small.
if it was childlike faith, it could be very anointed and beautiful.
Oh, it could be.
But it's
See
like
this? See?
it's
Yep.
so that those I read a lot of older books, and it's like, oh, that just the way they use the pen moved
Yeah,
everything.
it did. Abby, one of the songs that really moved me as I was listening to what you have on SoundCloud is Dead of Night. There we are with my more minor themes. Minor keys. Minor keys. But to me, when I was listening to the song, it's got the flavor of David's Psalms, where he experienced periods of darkness. What was the message that you wanted people to gain from that song? What was it you were trying to convey?
I think that song is very like straightforward, but like again, here we go. Universal is just our dark times, our troublesome times. He is ever present, and those times are molding you. You know, you guys were talking about basically when people come to God, it's not like everything's pretty great in the world, so I might as well toss Jesus in the mix. No, it's like something is going wrong. There are troubles. God is big, you know, and then you're like, he is there for me, and God is present. So in the sense, the song, which is in major, it feels minor, I guess, to you, just the sound of it.
Yes, it does.
It's just reminding you, like, you are present. You hear my cries. You're with me through all these things. And that's this recurring theme that people need, because again, we're looking for connection, and we're looking for something constant and steadfast in this changing world. And Jesus is not going to fail us, is not going to change. And that song is just my reminder, because my songs minister to me. I'm like, if nobody even hears them, you know, I'm writing it, and it ministered to me, you know?
It ministered to me when I listened to it. And what I'd like to do is share that with our listeners right now so they can get a taste of what you do, the magic that you work right here on the Get Real podcast with the Dead of Night.
I don't trust in the things I see. Every day I'm trying to trust more in what my faith agrees. Even when the world is crumbling underneath my feet, I know you're carrying me. When I cry out in the dead of night, you console me, tell me everything will be alright. Even when my morning doesn't come right after my night, I won't trust in my sight, I will trust in your truth. Your hand is the only thing I'll hold on to. So I'll wait in the still quiet silence for your voice to thunder through. But even if I don't hear you shouting out to me, Lord, I will follow still, for I know what your love can do. When I cry out in the dead of night, you console me, tell me everything will be alright. Even when my morning doesn't come right after my night, I won't trust in my sight, I will trust in your truth. Your hand is the only thing I'll hold on to. When I cry out in the dead of night, Lord, you hold me, tell me everything will be alright. I know that my morning may not come right after my night, but I won't trust in my sight, I will trust in your truth. Your word is the only thing I'll hold on to.
lithoscry.com